on-air sign to come up.
I've got a little word for
All right. We are on the air, so we'll go ahead and get started with the Community Planning and Transportation Committee for the month of June 2021. I appreciate all of you in attendance this afternoon. We've got a couple items on the agenda. First one is the one we go over every month in this committee, which is the Public Transit Ridership Report. We get an update from staff on the current status of our public transit system, the ridership numbers, any projects that are going on, any updates. It's where we give our staff feedback on anything to do with our public transit system as well. So if there are ever any questions, comments, concerns about public transit in Norman, this is the committee where we can get that relayed to staff and we can get those addressed. So contact your council members, contact me, and we'll make sure we discuss those here. So we have Taylor with our city staff here to give us a presentation on item number 1.
Thank you, council member. In your packet, we have the memo just kind of outlining some of those major projects that you highlighted that we try to talk about and give an overview, and then we have the ridership report. I'm just going to hit on a few things in the memo really quick. I know we're re-emerging from COVID and all these restrictions are lifted, but I just want to remind everyone that we are federally regulated, so there are some things that are out of our control that the TSA, Transportation Security Administration, is saying we have to do, and one of those is mask mandates. So we're still required to have our staff or our contractor staff wear masks, and for riders to wear masks, which we are still offering for people to take. If they don't have one when they get on the bus, we have some to give them. We are finally getting low on our stockpile. We had some that were given to us from ODOT, a lot, and we're getting low, so we're having to start order some, but those are still required. I think it's through the end of September as of right now, so we're still doing that.
That's all public transit in the United States.
Yeah,
it's
so that
federally funded, basically.
includes
or has
airports or airplanes, yeah, all public transportation. And then we're still limiting passenger capacity, but you may have seen at the beginning of June that capacity was lifted a little bit, and every 2 weeks we're kind of reevaluating that with Embark on and with the healthcare county healthcare authority to see if those restrictions can be lifted gradually every 2 weeks. In terms of ridership, we're hoping that this month is really telling, June, because we did start lifting capacity significantly more in June. So we hope that that responds favorably for more people riding on the bus. We were, since COVID, since the fall really, having to pass some people up because we were limiting capacity. So we're hoping that that's becoming less and less of an issue. And then I'm not sure where my bullet went on my copy, but the Go Norman Transit Plan, I appreciate council adopting that by resolution on Tuesday. Excited to get to work on implementing that plan, of course with more public engagement and more stakeholder engagement, and of course with council engagement. So more coming from that, but probably for a week or two we'll probably not talk about it and then hit it hard in the next fiscal year.
And I think several of us have probably already heard from constituents about the routes and the using the train depot as a station type thing. So we've relayed to them. I think I've relayed to those who have contacted me that we will have many conversations before we put the buses in front of the train station or whatever.
Yes, sir. And yeah, the plan is just that, a plan. We and I hope you all agree, think that they're all good ideas, but once implementation comes around, there's definitely a little bit more vetting that needs to happen and some more buy-in. So for grants, we're still drawing down on our regular operating grant that we receive annually from the Federal Transit Administration. We are waiting our first battery electric vehicle that was approved for purchase on May 27th. That's probably a 12 to 15 month time frame, not to build it, but it's in the queue. It's in the queue to go on the assembly line. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks once it's on the line to get out, get tested, and get here. And then hopefully in the next couple weeks we'll hear more about our grant application that was for the FTA 2021 lower no emission vehicle program. we've heard inklings, but nothing official. We're hoping it's a favorable outcome for us. We submitted a project for another battery electric bus and associated charger, and it was at a 70% federal split. It's a competitive program. It's highly competitive. The larger agencies usually get the lion's share because they can do a 50-50 split or a 40% federal split, but the minimum you can do is 80. So council approved a resolution authorizing that grant back in March, and we're hoping that that's a favorable outcome. The facility is going along great. If you go by on flood at all, please just take a look to the west, and it's definitely becoming more and more of a building. They're starting to work on the inside, which is exciting. We're still behind a little bit due to the weather we had a few months ago, and with the materials, just like everybody's experiencing for any construction project. So we are working to try to make up some ground with the contractor as much as possible, but we'll keep you guys informed if there's any major issues with our lease with the university and different things. We are reaching out to them now to start discussions on if that may need to be extended past the September 30th deadline that we have right now, and just to make sure that's in place if we need it. So
Great.
and then lastly, I'll just talk about the ridership a little bit. We did, for average passengers daily ridership, it did increase slightly from April to May. It's about 14 more people per day in May. And like I said, with the capacity restrictions capacity increasing and the restrictions kind of being lifted over June, really, we're hoping next month we'll see even more favorable ridership. The numbers don't lie, so we'll see. But we are seeing, if you look at the graph on page 2 of that performance report, we are seeing where our average daily had kind of flatlined, I think, due to the capacity restrictions. So I think we can see that start going up with those being lifted. I'm not going to go through every single graph in this report, but the paratransit is also increasing quite a bit. On page 4, you can see on the purple bars, if you have that in front of you in a color copy, the bars on the right side, they are going up quite a bit, and that's typical for this time of year. It's getting nicer out, people are getting out and about, but also, again, the capacity restrictions being lifted, and people are feeling more comfortable getting out with the vaccinations. So with that, I'll take any questions, council member.
So I had one that was brought up by a member of the public before the meeting. So we have had Wi-Fi on the buses for a long time. Do we not have Wi-Fi currently on the buses?
No, and even when I was at OU, that was kind of dying by the wayside. The system that we had never really worked properly, and when one unit went down on a bus, it took us, a couple weeks or so to get it fixed, it seemed like, but people weren't complaining that it wasn't there. So OU, when I was there, kind of let it, like I said, kind of go as units were going down. That's something we're exploring. We're getting close to putting out a bid for our onboard surveillance system. That's kind of one of our last big ticket one-time startup cost items that we need to do. Some of the buses don't have working cameras, which is a major problem for both passengers and for operators for liability reasons, but just to get them all on one uniform new system. But something that could come along with that, depending on the price, is a live video option if an emergency. And with that, you need the Wi-Fi, the cellular capabilities. And some systems allow you to flip a switch and provide Wi-Fi through that same system to the public. So that's kind of how we're approaching that option right now, and we'll know more about it in the next couple months.
City Manager Pyle.
Councilmember Holman, in a recent conversation with our Pioneer Library System CEO, they've got vendors that provide just a wide range of services, and one of the things one of her vendors said is we have the ability to provide like a mobile Wi-Fi, and it's, initially thought about you when you're riding the bus, you can access library books and read books while you're going, but it's Wi-Fi nonetheless. So I'll make sure that the vendors that our library system is aware of that do those types of things are on Taylor's contact list, and at least we'll have some other option to compare prices against. But it's vendors they use all the time for various services, but it could be a neat combination of service.
Well, I definitely support exploring whatever options we can to provide that
Yeah,
on our
absolutely.
bus system if possible. So.
It'd be nice to have it under one system just for the service calls and different things. Having them separated, I think we learned a lot when I was at OU that it never worked properly. So we'll explore every option just to provide another amenity to the passengers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments from committee members about public transit?
And I'll just make a quick aside, Councilmember Studley. I was talking to Embark about adding that reasonable modification language to the website, and on the Norman page of the Embark website, they did add that blurb about if you need a reasonable modification, please reach out. Here's the phone number. Instead of just the standard civil rights or ADA language, they did specifically call out that reasonable modification request.
Did you add the email onto it too? Because that was the issue, is that some people are nonverbal, and so a phone call wouldn't.
Yeah. Sorry, I
Okay.
should have just said contact, but yeah,
Okay.
it's on there. I'll double check. I'm pretty sure when I looked at it, it was on there, but if it's not, we'll make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments, questions from the public about public transit? Taxis, we're going to talk about that on item number 3.
Hey,
Yeah, John, hi.
you know, with these Wi-Fi things been holding on for so long, and the communication between your public clients and getting to know what is out there is really hard. I mean, when you first did the Alameda route, nobody knew it had changed, and people were scared to get on the bus because they didn't know where they were going. Now, I was promised from the resource in Oklahoma City, Embark, that they would, by the time 4 weeks was up, and that was a year ago at least, that because they were waiting on Alameda to be certified. They said after that, they would have flyers on the bus for you to know where these routes are going. They don't have, I've told many people, they need a platform of a map on the buses telling where that bus is going and where it's going to let off at. Because they got to ask people, and they're missing routes and everything else because they don't know. But we are not communicating with the people that need the buses. You say contact Wi-Fi. Do you know most people that use the buses are on low income? How are they going to hit Wi-Fi when they don't have it? You know, data, they only have it at their house. So our communication, we're putting a nice layer of barrier between us and them. And we want them to ride the buses, you know, but we've got to make sure they know the times and they know the places. And these are not being done. Do you all have a flyer that you can put out? How hard is it to copy the map and highlight the area where the bus goes and slap it up there and then put the website on the bottom saying if you have any more questions, you can go to this website.
Right.
How hard is that? I mean, we should have been doing that from day one. And our communication, in Oklahoma City they do it. They have flyers and they have bus maps on the buses. I had someone check it out, even though I don't trust to go all the way to Oklahoma City. But I had someone check that out because I wanted to compare it, our buses to their buses. If we're even doing the minimum, and we're not even doing the minimum right now. And these things are easy fixes. You know what I'm saying? How hard is it to put a map up there and highlight on all the buses where they go? How hard is that? 5 minutes worth of work for each one? Oh my God, it can be done. And the communication would do so much better. Now, flyers are so they can do it from home. You know what I'm saying? You don't have any flyers right now. And they try to do it from home. Some people don't have Wi-Fi at home. So they can't do that. You know what I'm saying? But you're saying you want to communicate with the riders and find out what they want to do. It's there, but they can't communicate with you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So let's get it where they can communicate with y'all. Get feedback from you. They can't, you know, a lot of them can't see this meeting. You know what I'm saying? If they want a bus with Wi-Fi on it, they could see this meeting.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, they could go to the library. The library, I think, right now is still only allowing so many people in the library. So it's limited, okay? But now let's look at the taxis. If we were able to get the taxi service, we'll talk to that later.
Yeah, we'll get on that one, but
you know what I'm trying to say?
we will
But we are
definitely-
not
yeah.
communicating with our clients.
we can work on those issues for sure, John.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
If I may,
Um,
Councilmember, about
yes,
the
please.
flyers and the maps,
Say
it's
it.
my understanding that we have them on the buses. I know we're going through a bit of a reprint phase. And so we may be limiting them a little bit as we kind of wean out the old set and go to the new
Yeah.
set. But I'll circle back around to
Please.
Embark and make sure that we are providing those on the buses.
I always recall there being a brochure that unfolded
Yeah.
and the whole map was on
And
there.
we have produced one since we took over the system just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't recall exactly when we produced it, but they should be provided on the vehicles.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Peacock.
Is there any way that we could provide basically a standard recording, kind of like what you see on other public transportation systems that say, next stop, and announces the stop, and then it says if you continue on this line, next stop, and then it actually announces. So it's not the driver announcing it. It's just a standard recording that comes on
Yeah.
automatically. So
They have those in larger cities.
It is automated. It doesn't say the next one is, but once it's a certain amount of feet away, it will say next stop, Maine and Lahoma.
Okay.
It won't say stop after that, Maine
Sure.
and Berry, but it does say that verbally, and there's a scrolling text on there.
Perfect.
We're required to have that for ADA reasons.
Thought that was.
If we don't have that, you're exactly right. The driver has to yell it out, and that's less reliable.
Yeah.
The drivers don't always do that,
Right,
and
right.
just being able to enunciate that. But
Certainly.
It's
I
on there.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Committee, any other final? Okay.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate that. Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is a discussion regarding public safety through environmental design. And we have Teddy Wilson here from the Norman Police Department to give us a presentation.
Mr. Chairman, this one comes before you, initiated from a conversation with Mr. Dave Beck at the University of Oklahoma School of Architecture. He had called the office and said he had been going through a training program on this subject. And he described to me how it worked, and I thought, that is a pretty interesting topic. And lo and behold, members of our police department went through the exact same training program that Dave Beck had gone through. So we put them together on the phone, and lo and behold, yep, they went through the same training, got the same certification. We said we need to share this at a committee meeting with the council, just as a public education opportunity. Mr. Beck said he would be working with students in the upcoming semester, students interested in architecture, to be able to put together teams of students that might be able to go out and assess properties at property owners' request to help them understand these concepts and improve property value and safety around their real property holdings. So we just wanted to introduce the concept, and I thought, well, I've got one council member who probably has a pretty good understanding of what this is all about, but this will be the first time I get to see the presentation as well. So glad we've got more than one employee who had gone through this training program is able to share it with us. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question real quick,
Absolutely.
so I'm clear on this. As I understand it, is this based on broken windows theory?
It is,
Okay.
yes. So broken window theory, basically, just in a nutshell, is when someone sees a broken window and it doesn't get fixed over time, people become okay with that, and then things go downhill from there. You see another broken window, people become okay with that. Urban decay starts to grow, and then it just grows and grows and grows. And then you have cities like Detroit that just become dilapidated. People move out, they don't want to move back in. Things. That's the broken window theory. In a nutshell, that's a whole weeks-long discussion in 30 seconds. Crime prevention through environmental design. So I'm not going to say that term the whole time. We refer to it as CPTED. We love our acronyms because it's a lot quicker. This class is the basic class is 40 hours long, so you're going to get a week's worth of stuff in about 20 minutes or less. So please bear with me. If you have questions, please stop me. I'm going to blaze through it. I've been teaching this portion of the class for about 10 years now. So it all started when we, as a city, decided to start a program called Crime-Free Multi-Housing, which involved our apartment communities and attempting to create safer environments for all of those a long time ago. I moved out of that program as I became promoted to lieutenant, and now here I am. So I get to share with you some of the things I learned. Just to quote, if you guys are looking for anything to dive deeper into this theory and this subject, Jane Jacobs is the one who coined the phrase crime prevention through environmental design. She basically spearheaded the whole movement to this. Timothy Crow is now more of our more up-to-date person who has written textbooks and things on this subject. This is a quote from him that basically just says that we can improve upon things and reduce fear and become profitable and improve upon the quality of life for everybody. So look those individuals up. They've got some great resources you can look up if you're interested. So the approach is a multiple disciplinary approach to deterring criminal behavior, essentially, is what we're looking to deter. We look at multiple aspects within our city, and we look at planning. We use architecture, landscaping architecture, and then law enforcement principles, which are not necessarily, it's more crime prevention theory is what we look at. We also use engineers and things like that. This is not a police department function. This is a group function. We can't do this. This is not, I don't have any experience in planning. I don't have any experience in architecture. I do landscaping at home. I have 10 acres, so it's a lot. And I'm not an engineer, so I don't have any backgrounds in that, but I can help with some of the theories behind this stuff. So the key elements we look at are surveillance. These are our 4 key elements. So surveillance, and I'll explain all of these in detail. Access control, territoriality, activity support, which is a huge one, maintenance, and then we talk about crime prevention components to all of that stuff. And I'll discuss those and show you some of the things that we look at. The principles of CPTED is number 1 is to provide natural surveillance. So natural surveillance, I'll show you some pictures of that and what it means. Basically, when I walk somewhere, I want to be able to see everything that's going on, essentially. I don't want any hiding spots. I don't want any dark areas, anything that could hinder my ability to see what's going on. When I walk into a parking lot, I can see everything. That's essentially what natural surveillance is. Territorial control is who controls this space. So I want to know where public ends and private begins. That's all territorial control is. It's very easy. Provide natural access control. So the thing we look at there is, where do I go? When I get there, how do I get there? That's territorial control. I want to be provided a natural access point. So a walkway, a pathway, and which direction do I go? So we talk about signage. That is huge. And, if you're going to an apartment community, we want to know where the office is, because in a lot of our apartment communities, nobody has any clue where the office is. So if you have a sign telling you it's that way, you can go that way and probably find it. So that's one thing we look at. So talking about types of surveillance, we have 3 types. We have natural surveillance, like I discussed. So it's a natural occurring, open, well-lighted area. Usually it's free of cost. You can do that on your own with a pair of clippers and, just going around cutting trees. And I'll discuss that in a minute. It's done by residents, management, maintenance, neighbors. It's for everybody. Okay. Mechanical surveillance. So that's use of cameras, mirrors. You see that a lot in stores. You see the little bubble mirrors up on top. It's not a bubble mirror, but there's a camera right there. So it's mechanical surveillance. It's always using that for somebody looking. There are costs associated with those. We also have organized surveillance that includes like security patrols, or if you're limiting access to an area, you have a gate, you have gate guards, something like that. That's what that is. Natural surveillance. These are Norman pictures. Most of these are Norman pictures. I built this PowerPoint actually back in 2012. So these are a little older pictures, but they still serve a good purpose. And these businesses are still there. So 7-Eleven, they've changed their design a little bit. If you've noticed 7-Eleven, a lot of times they take most of their signage off of the windows. That's so you can see what's going on, and the clerks can see what's going on outside. You can see what's going on inside, they can see what's going on outside. If you've been to any of the newer 7-Elevens they've redesigned, you'll notice that most of the time they're either in the very front of the store on a raised platform, or they're in the middle of the store on a raised platform. Does anybody know why that is?
So you can tell if they're being robbed.
Exactly. You can tell they're being robbed, or they can see everybody in the store at once. If you'll notice, they are higher than their shelves, so they can see around their shelves. So if somebody's hiding in the store, they know they're there. So, and they have those mirrors all the way around so they can see the blind spots. It's pretty ingenious. Really, all it is limiting blind spots. That's what that is. And natural surveillance is all about limiting blind spots. I use Popeyes, for example. They love advertising. They have a lot of it. And I've noticed recently, last time I was in there, they have see-through advertising. You can't see through it when you're looking out towards the inside, but you can see out in, or you can see outside. So they've changed that a lot, and that's pretty cool that the manufacturers are starting to create that stuff. But we still can't see in when we're driving by, so there's no natural surveillance on the inside. But that's just some of the other ones. So Forest Point, Hampton Woods, and University Greens, I believe they changed their name. But
All in Ward 7.
so a lot of woods.
All three of those are in Ward 7.
Yes, right? Obviously, Forest Point, that's in the wintertime. If it was in the summertime or right now, it would be heavily, there would be a lot of foliage and a lot of leaves. It's really, really dark at night. A lot of people feel unsafe, but it's a nice apartment community. A lot of people live there. So these are just examples of natural surveillance. There's not a lot of natural surveillance at Forest Point because of the wooded area. A lot of people like that feel because it makes you feel like you're in the woods. Hampton Woods, it's very open. The trees are trimmed up. The bushes are trimmed down. We'll talk about the landscaping 3-foot, 7-foot rule here in a minute. But again, most apartment communities are going to have some sort of that uniformed look. Just depends on the management and maintenance. Access control, types of access control. Natural, it's using medium height bushes, dirt berms, walking paths, sidewalks, all that stuff. That is natural environmental. You can create that stuff using landscaping, things like that. Mechanical, talking about security gates, doors, deadbolts, windows, locks, things like that. Organized, again, security, patrol, courtesy patrol, things like that. Organized means it's patrolled by somebody. Natural environmental, here's some examples of that. We have a lot of that around the city complex. We can see it. We have really, really good natural surveillance around the city complex. The maintenance does a great job keeping that up for us. Access controls, again, just examples. Doors, gates, things like that. Access control, organized, gate guards, things. So territoriality, this is where it can get confusing. Just on some of our terms that we use. So territoriality is a psychological impression that people get when they look at the property. So when you look at a property, and you think about the property, that's what this is talking about. So if you look at let's say a neighborhood, for example, and you're in a cul-de-sac, and you see the sidewalk, okay? The sidewalk would be public or private. It'd be public because everybody has access to it. But beyond the sidewalk, whose property is that? That's the person that lives in that house. So that would be, I would venture to say, private. But you can also consider it semi-private because you can still walk there, even though it's private property. But if you go any farther up into the dwelling, then that's private property. Now, if it's gated off, which we'll talk about in a second, if it's got a fence next to the sidewalk, would you consider that semi-private or private? Private, because it's telling you you can't go there. So that's what that barrier is for. That's where it can kind of get somewhat confusing. So those are some of the things we like to look at. Signage, again, we talked about signage earlier. It tells you where you can and can't go, or where you should go as versus to where you shouldn't. So, and again, maintenance, I said that earlier, maintenance is a huge part of all of this. If the property is not well maintained, people aren't going to know where they can and can't go. The signs won't be well maintained. The signs may not be there because they got ripped down or something like that. Territorial reinforcement. So this is talking about where private property begins and public property ends. So just as my example with the gate or the fence and the sidewalk, this is an example of that. It fosters a sense of ownership for the person who owns that property, and it can make an area seem like it's owned by a group of folks, even if it's not. And I'll show some examples of that here in a second. Maintenance, again, I harp on maintenance all the time. Obviously, that's geared more towards apartment communities because this was geared towards apartment communities when I was creating this. So here's some that is not owned by the individual, but the individual lived there at an apartment community, and they made this for themselves. So this reinforced their territory as that apartment, and they made it look nice. And people respected that, and this is how it looked, and this is what they liked, so they kept it. And it made the apartment community look a lot better. It just kept it nice. Activity support. This is something that I think we do as a city very, very well. Activity support, we're always doing some sort of activities as a city. I love it, which is why I'm here with my family, if you didn't know that. So it involves appropriate use of recreational facilities and common areas. Again, this is geared towards apartments. So basically what our goal is with this is we want to fill the area with legitimate users so the abusers will leave. That's what we do, okay? That is the whole purpose of this, is to fill the area with people that want to use it for the appropriate reasons. Obviously, playgrounds are a big thing for apartment communities because there's a lot of children. We don't want people that hurt children in those areas. So if we have parents and a bunch of children and people watching, most of the time those people don't show up because there's people there to watch. The coined phrase that we like to use is bringing eyes to the street. That's a big one that Jane Jacobs came up with, is always bringing eyes to the street. So when you're bringing eyes to the street, it makes our criminal behavior diminish because it feels like they're being watched. Well, that gets rid of criminal behavior. So that's a good thing. And I'll discuss that on the last slide. But so again, some more examples of good activity support. So the 3 Ds of CPTED, designation. What is the intended use of this space / property? So like I said with the playgrounds, what is the intended use of the playground to play on for the children? Definition. Is it clear who owns this space? Is it clear what activities are allowed on this space? So is there a rules sign? The Griffin Dog Park, for example, very, very well designed. It's got a great list of rules. You can do this. You cannot do this. It's very well done. It has fencing, which dogs can go here and which dogs can go here. So it's very well designed. Design. Does the physical environment support the intended use? That's a good question. I mean, it can be different for everybody. So those are our 3 Ds. Lighting. Lighting is my favorite part of CPTED. I enjoyed it. I have no idea why, but I really liked it. I got to play with all kinds of different interesting lights and different lighting, daylight to extreme dark to dusk to dawn. It was a lot of fun. So that was one of my favorite things. It's a powerful tool, but good lighting without surveillance, natural surveillance, may encourage criminal activity. So even if you have good lighting, if there's nobody around, it still can encourage that stuff. Just so you know, it's not a solve-all problem.
I would mention that was a big, significant part of the city's lighting ordinance was
Yes.
lights on light poles that light up the sky leave a halo around the pole. It makes it easy or for someone to be hiding right next to the pole and you might not see them.
I have an example of that. I'm glad you brought that up. So
Light up the ground instead of the sky.
the lighting ordinance he referred to, I had to look it up because I forgot what the ordinance number was. But if you want to write it down, it's section 22, 431.6. So that's commercial lighting, and it's under the zoning ordinances. We had to look that up because I couldn't find it earlier, and I knew I had it in my file somewhere, and I looked it up, tried to find it on Unicode, and I couldn't find it. So the gracious city attorney's office helped me out there. So, but anyway, it's very detailed. So look it up. It's something you'll need to know, especially being on council. You'll need to know that for sure. Anyway, moving on. So color rendition, that's one thing we look at. So different colors of light show you different colors of things. And it'll play tricks on your eyes. And it's something you have to look at with every different color light bulb. That's why there's so many hundreds of light bulbs at Lowe's, different colors and different temperatures of colors. Whether you have your daylights, your soft whites, your warm whites, My wife loves one certain color of light, so I have to go buy that one certain color of light, and if it's a different color, I get in trouble. So I make sure to have that one, a bunch of those on hand, but besides the point. Anyway, so we look at those. As you can see, different colors, same person, same picture, different things. So here's before and after. So on the left, you have high pressure sodium, which is what you see with the orange tingy that OG&E puts out most of the time, or OEC. They're cheap bulbs. They buy them in bulk. That's what they use. They last a long time. They're very efficient and cost effective. They do not have good color rendition. They are orange. They make everything look orange, or they make a green car look black, and they make a blue car look black. So if we, as law enforcement, get a description of a car that is causing an issue, and it's a certain color that we get from dispatch, it may not be that color if it's under that light. So that is a problem. We may get a shirt or a guy in a red shirt, and it ends up not being a red shirt when it was a brown shirt or something like that. But so descriptions can falter from those colors, from witnesses' views or whatever perceptions of whatever color they saw. I know the city recently moving to LED lights in most places, which is outstanding. I remember when they did that, when we were doing stuff with the crime-free program, and I was super thrilled about that because it went to a white light source. White light source is awesome because you can see the rainbow of colors in that white light source, and it helps out tremendously for descriptions. Not only does it help with anybody who might need to see curbs at night, because when you look at the orange lights, the curbs are hard to see at night. One thing I preach to apartment communities is paint your curbs, because a painted curb at night is easier to see than a non-painted curb. That was just something that we discussed, so people didn't trip, especially when you're trying to meet ADA compliance and things like that. Sidewalk width and things like that. If you paint your curbs, it's easier to see. So anyway, moving on. Here's what Councilmember Holman was talking about. Hiding in plain sight. Here's your different colors of lights. Far left, that's a mercury vapor. Your slightly left is the, far left is metal halide. So high pressure sodium, and then you have two LEDs on the right. So if you can't see the individual, see if I can get that mouse to pull up. There's a person standing right here. It's hard to see with the lights on, I know. And then over here, same person right here. It's hard to see. Then you start moving over here, and then you can see them. So,
Those are full cutoff fixtures too.
yeah, those are full cutoffs.
On the LED ones.
So,
I love those too.
Yeah.
and full cutoffs are required on the ordinance, which is awesome because they put out a lot of light. Especially, and I can't remember how high they have to be, but I think it's 15 feet, I believe, something like that. But the cone of light that it puts off is quite wide. So once you start looking at parking lots, and I'll show you an example kind of that, you start overlapping them certain distances, you get just an immense amount of light in a small area from those overlapping of lights. So here's some more. Directionality equals efficiency. So the direction of the light being shined, you get more of that. This one right here is more of an example of landscaping that's interfering with lighting. So the tree has grown kind of under where the light is, so it's cutting off that cone, and it really serves no purpose. So that's another maintenance issue that we discuss. These wall packs, these are they're cutoffs, but I think they're three or quarter cutoffs, something like that. They're on the side of the building. They're not pole lights, so they're a little bit different. But again, orange light, not a fan. So moving on to home security measures, since they're going to be discussing stuff like, I wanted to add this in since they were going to talk about having students go around and discussing it with homeowners and things like that. This is something everybody does. This is something I do. In every house I've owned, I've gone around and taken out all the screws. And it takes a while, but it's the first thing I do when I move into a new house is I take out all the screws and my strike plates and my hinges, and I put in 3-inch screws. What that does is it secures your door frame to the actual wall, and I've got a slide to show that. So here is how a door frame is made up. So you have your door jamb, which is the white, usually decorative part of what your door slides into when it latches. Behind that, you usually have some sort of shim or something like that that makes it square that they put in. Then you have 2x4s, and usually it's a double 2x4, just for framing reasons. Well, when you put in the screws that the hinges come in, they're usually 3/4 of an inch. Those are standard. That's what you get in your package. They're terrible. They will rip out. You could run up and probably just push the door as hard as you can, and it'll rip right out of the wood. Not to mention the wood that they're using for most of it is pine or whitewood, which is extremely soft. It's not a hardwood. But when you throw in 3-inch screws, it goes into both of those 2x4s, and it creates a secure, really hard to defeat lock. You actually have to break the metal in order to pop that lock off. I know when we first started talking about apartment security, there was a lot of medics and firefighters that were pretty angry with us because we preached putting these in, and they had to kick doors in to get to people, and it was difficult because they couldn't breach the door. So I was like, yeah, well, sorry, you have tools. But I mean, they ended up getting in. They were just pulling our chain, but it's difficult because it proves a point. So a lot of people wouldn't say to do hinges, but if you're going to secure one side of the door, why not both? Because if I decide to get in that door, I'm going to kick the hinge because it's easier. It's 3-inch screw, or it's a 3/4 inch screw as well. If you know anything about construction, then you're going to know that. But 3-inch screws on both. You don't have to take all the screws out of the hinge. You can put one in each. That works just as well. It just gives you something to secure the actual door jamb to the wall. So you're kicking against that. Another thing is deadbolts. So deadbolts are huge. We always recommend a deadbolt, which is, does everybody know what a deadbolt is? Okay, just checking. Some people don't. So strike plate is the metal thing that goes on the door jamb that it strikes when it hits and closes. So we look at those. But 3-inch screws are a must. I preach that to everybody. It doesn't matter if anybody has a door that's kicked in on a burglary we go to, put 3-inch screws in it. It'll help. Landscaping, 3-foot, 7-foot rule. So it's pretty simple. 3-foot, 7-foot. So what that is I want all of my bushes trimmed down to 3 feet and all of my trees trimmed up to 7 feet. I would like to be able to walk my entire property without a branch hitting me in the head. I'm 6 foot tall, so I can measure that by me, just walking. So I like to do that. If I'm walking a property, that's how I would measure that. But there are a lot of people that have bushes that are really high, like boxwoods, that if you cut them down to 3 feet, it will kill them. I understand that. I do know some about landscaping. So what we ask those folks to do is we ask them to trim up the bush and to where you can see someone's feet behind it. If they're standing behind it, you can see it. That's how we combat killing that bush, because landscaping is expensive. Let's be honest. So I don't want to cause anybody any more money than they have to spend. All it takes is time and a pair of bush trimmers or tree trimmers, and you go out there and make it happen, and it will completely change the look and the feel of a property. So that is that. Again, here's some examples. This right here, if you look at this, you can't even see that there's a window back there. But once those bushes were taken out, and I don't know where this is, but I love the example. It completely changes that. So you can hide right between those bushes and you'd never know that somebody was breaking in that window. So taking that out shows that there's a window there. Now, could you trim those bushes back and still show a window? Absolutely. But for whatever reason, they took that out. Here's another one. This one is in Norman. This one was overgrown. I don't know why they took all the bushes out, but again, you could trim those down to make it manageable and still see some of that. But they went in and put different landscaping there. So, but it's the same shot, just they took all the bushes. This one again, I love all the foliage, but it creates hiding spots. It's just to me that I wouldn't want to walk through there if it was dark. That's just how it goes. Here's some sort of natural surveillance. I just want to show an example of it. Obviously, there's no leaves on the trees, but if there were, these trees, you can tell that they've been trimmed up. And also, it's good for the trees when you trim them up. Just examples of fencing. I'm not saying every property needs a fence, but some of these just show, these are just examples of different types of fencing you can have. You can have fencing that looks really aesthetically pleasing, but it also provides for territorial reinforcement and security, so you can keep people out of an area. Again, on apartment communities, fencing. Also, this is the last slide I want to talk about. So there's some other CPTED theories. We talk about eyes on the street. One we don't talk about in basic CPTED, but when we start going to advanced and other CPTED courses, you talk about things outside the box. Public art. That's a huge one. Our city loves public art. I think it's awesome. So one of the things that I learned when I went through the training was in Louisville, Kentucky. And Louisville started, and you're going to laugh when you hear this because we have it now too. And I wanted to bring it back. And when I came back from it, I heard about the program because the Arts Council, I have a lot of friends that are part of the Arts Council. And they were like, hey, we're going to start this new idea. And I was like, that's hilarious because I just learned about that. So the bike rack sculptures. Louisville has these just awesome sculptures all along their streets on 6th Street. No, that's Austin. Whatever it's called. I can't remember. Whatever. Their bar district, like our campus corner. And they have all these downtown, they have all these awesome sculptures. And they don't look like ours with the pipe, the bent. They're like legit, like multi-million-dollar sculptures is what they look like. But they're bike racks. And they just look amazing. I was like, we should do that in Norman. So I come back and I start talking to them like, oh yeah, we're going to do that. I was like, really? So they started doing it. And I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. So I love the contest that we do. But that's public art. That brings people to our streets to look at that stuff. Not only does it provide security for our bikes, so we don't have all the bikes that are stolen, which we have a lot of, and it allows people a place to ride to our downtown, hang out, lock their bike up, go in, have a good time, come back, their bike's still there, cool, they ride home. But it also provides something for people to come and check out through our city. Second Friday Art Walk is another one. I loved it when we started that. That is so cool because it brings people to the streets. It brings in public art. It brings in all of that. Murals. We have tons of murals in this city, which is really cool. We have some great artists in this town. All the festivals that we have, this city is amazing with festivals. I was the bike team lieutenant for a few years. I spent 13 years on the bike team, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But my favorite part were all the festivals that we got to work because I enjoyed them all. Medieval Fair was probably one of my favorites, but it's just because I love that stuff. So, but I worked that every year, probably for at least 8 of the 13. But it was wonderful. So the festivals that we have, all of that stuff are crime prevention tools that we use to bring people into our city. Do we have problems there sometimes? But are there really that big of problems? No. But you know that's what it is. It's we bring people in. That's what we do as a city. So we love to bring people to our city, and I think we continue to do that. I love what the professor's trying to do. I think it's going to be a good thing for us. What I will say though is CPTED's great on the outside of building, but CPTED is meant for the planning phase. It is not meant for after the fact. That we have adapted it to after the fact. Because obviously we weren't in on it, but it is meant for planning. I know we have fire prevention has to go through all the plans beforehand. There are several cities around the country that have implemented CPTED into their city ordinances, and they also require certain things within the city ordinances, just like they do fire prevention code. That is, I think, Tampa, Florida, Portland, Eugene, there's a bunch, Tucson. I have copies of some of these ordinances. I don't know if they're still in effect or if they've changed them, but there was a lot of them. And if you want some of those, I'll be more than happy to provide what I have. Like I said, they're out of date. I don't know how up to date they are, but I do have copies of those ordinances. So those are some of the things that they've done in the past. I know Orlando had them or still does. but they require that into their city ordinance for any new building. So, but it all starts at the planning phase. So that's important.
One of those topics we talked about with Mr. Beck, that over time behavior changes, and we'll remember older neighborhoods that were all designed with alleys, and you'd have your utilities in the alley and the trash pickup in the alley. And then people stopped maintaining their own space in the alley behind their homes, and they wound up becoming a place for people to do naughty things, so they don't build neighborhoods with alleys anymore. And it changed on the planning side, and that was part of the public safety through environmental design. Just have fewer places for people to do naughty things with no eyes in the alley.
That's right. Yes, sir. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Teddy.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Are there any
Absolutely.
comments, questions from committee members about the presentation?
I've got a
Councilor Nash?
couple of questions, maybe clarification.
Sure.
So it seems like our implementation of this, kind of a deviation from my understanding of broken window theory, is we're focused on the planning phase, the design. We're not implying a change in policing to focus more on disorderly areas. You know, broken window theory, there's some of the criticisms where there's the potential for racial bias by a loosely defined term disorder. But we're not implying that we're going to have any kind of carryover policy into focusing on disorderly areas, correct?
That's correct. No, I'm strictly here because I was asked this morning to come present this because I'm a CPTED instructor. Several years ago, I was in the community policing office. I managed a program that was for apartment communities. This was the basis of that program, to figure out how to make them safer for everybody in the community. And that's why they asked me to come present this as a whole. But no, there's no.
This is fantastic. I mean, these are all little things that we can do that can
Yes.
have an overall large impact on crime and crime reduction.
I will tell you, after taking all these courses, I walked through a parking lot and I never saw it the same. I would look at things and be like, okay, that's weird. It just never felt the same. So, but sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Councilor Schuler?
Yes.
So you mentioned that this is meant for the planning phase, and that you were primarily doing this for like apartment complexes and things on the front end. So I guess currently, what is happening with this in terms of like new businesses, and like, is there a way outside of working with Dr. Beck and the students for them to like learn about this in their planning phase of like building within Norman, or outside of us considering ordinances that help create more safe spaces, I guess, like what's happening currently with this?
We don't have a program, but we do have several of us who are trained through this. I know all of our SROs have gone through CPTED training. Some of them have gone through school-based CPTED training. They have specific instances for churches, schools. They have just different aspects of it. Commercial, residential, specifically geared towards those subjects. I've gone through most of those, but we do have that ability. If anybody wants to give us a call, we can absolutely set that up. I've done multiple security surveys over the years for fraternities, sororities, churches, schools. I have a lot of them that I've done, so we'd be more than happy to help with
So
that.
would you be the connection point to that, or would
I
somebody
can do
else
them.
be?
I don't have a problem doing that. I work day shift patrol, so it'd be difficult, but I can do them. Jeff Casillas is our person that does that.
Okay.
Officer
right now,
Casillas
so-
was the one on the phone with us
Yes.
with Dave, and he got called out of town this
Yes.
morning. So thankfully, we are loaded up
But
on folks with the
I have
expertise.
no issue on doing that.
Okay.
And
No,
when
just-
we move into our new development center, as the library, old central library is under reconstruction, our ability to have knowledge centralized in the one-stop shop to be able to provide more educational opportunities for owner builder versus some of our larger developers. And when Mr. Beck shared the concept, I thought everybody needs to know this. It should just not be a handful of people. Well, we get it, and we're not telling enough people what this looks like and how this could improve the quality of life for anybody who's going to wind up occupying this space over the years. So this was just, step one in our ability to begin to roll out what we think makes really good sense. It's not a big expensive thing that would increase the price of housing, and affordability is always an issue. But to be aware of things, whether you're the architect or the developer and you're trying to figure out where the road's going to go in your subdivision, if these things are in the back of your mind, I think we can wind up with a better product that improves quality of life. So we intend to share this information.
Yeah, I was just thinking about educational opportunities for businesses, but also not just, apartment complexes, but even like new homeowners.
Absolutely.
And things like that you could implement, in your own space.
We
to
do,
be safer.
during the training, we do get to go through blueprints of buildings that were, and actually look at them and determine if entire properties or giant skyscrapers even that we had during the training to look at and discuss what we would change or how we would alter. And we're in there not with just police, but architects and engineers and planning folks from all over the country during these trainings. So it was really cool to get to be in a group with other people that are outside law enforcement to get their perspective on that. So it was neat.
So do we currently have any type of ordinance or anything in place for anything similar to this?
Just the lighting part, really,
Yep.
Just the lighting?
for commercial, not for residential.
The lighting ordinance. So Judy Price used to be our revitalization specialist before she retired. She really pushed the lighting ordinance to get it passed back when she was employed here. Basically the lighting ordinance is mainly for lighting pollution. It's so it doesn't just shine up in the light, and that's what it was mainly for. But again, that's part of this as well. We want lighting shining downward, not up and just polluting the sky or your neighbor or something
And
like
on the
that.
LED piece, OG&E has indicated they will have all of their lights converted to the happy color
Awesome.
with super energy efficiency and long life by the year 2023. So you've seen they've converted all the lights on I-35 and the new LEDs, and they're just taking a circuit at a time and upgrading, because you have to upgrade the fixture as well as the bulb. But that is their goal. All the lights they own and maintain will be LED by 2023.
So is the CPTED, is that something that we could recommend or make as an ordinance moving forward to say that if you're going to build in Norman, this is the standard that we have?
Could absolutely be. We're working on engineering design standards, which take into curb height and where you put fire hydrants and all those kind of things. So that could be a component of that conversation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, I was just trying to imagine, because it sounds like the best place to start is in that planning stage. There's lots of things that you can do to, retroactively suggest, increased security measures just with all the work that you've done. But yeah, so how does that work? How do you coordinate it? I mean, I know we're doing a lot of lighting work. I know OG&E is doing a lot of lighting work. We really do have a great commercial lighting ordinance. How do we sort of expand on that? But the other thing I was thinking about, because you're specializing on apartment communities, which is great, but we also have the Neighborhood Alliance coming online. And I think that could be another place where the education for, if we've missed the planning stage, that could be another
Great vehicle.
place to educate and maybe, set up a way to get, I think, what did you call it? Security survey. There might be a way that even within neighborhoods, you could, encourage people to, like there could be like a checklist for a security survey or something like that. So.
I do have those
Oh,
checklists.
great,
So
yeah.
That's why we have these meetings.
I know. I love
I have
that.
copies of a lot of
Yeah.
different things, so I'd be more than happy to share that with
Yeah.
anybody.
Yes,
And,
please.
the other thing, just on the education piece, are we doing Neighbors Night Out this year? Do you know?
It's in October.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's wrong. It used to be in October.
Yeah.
Man,
August.
it's in August.
It used to be in August, and
Yeah,
then it
it's-
moved to October because
Yeah,
it was
So
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 hot,
hot.
and then
And now
the
it's come back
national
to
group
August,
moved it
and
back
I
to
don't-
August. It's
Yeah.
the second
I don't
week
know.
of August.
I
Is
don't
that
know.
correct?
October was
Second
better.
Tuesday.
We like October.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't decided yet.
I believe they are, but I believe it's one big event. They've moved to nationally doing one big event, and if the neighborhoods would like, they can do their own.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what they were discussing doing. So, again, I'm not part of that office anymore. I just get told where to go. So,
That's just another place, another education point to.
and we did that. So when I was in the community policing office, we did do that through Neighborhood Watch.
Yeah.
Any Neighborhood Watch group, we discussed crime prevention techniques and CPTED through that. Security surveys we pushed. I don't know if we've gotten away from that, but I don't know about Neighborhood Watch either. I don't know if that's something that we don't do anymore. I should know that. I don't. So, but Neighborhood Alliance would be a great place to do that.
And we're getting ready to start a contract with the Neighborhood Alliance, and I know there's, security and reducing crime and all that kind of stuff is just a part of that. But anyway, just trying to think that through, and like you said, are there some proactive things that we could do at the planning level to incorporate all this training that you have and other people have? And I love that Dave Beck makes good use of his students to help us solve problems in Norman. So it's like, come on, Dave.
Looking at like the visibility ordinance that we were talking about for housing and things like that, this seems like something that could kind of fall in that. Your security, what's your security rating for your
Could
house?
incentivize that.
Yeah.
Show us the checklist.
Absolutely. I had it was I think 100-point checklist for apartment communities when
Wow.
and they had to, in order to get a certificate to pass to the next phase for the crime-free housing program, they had to complete, I think, 7 minimum requirements, but all of it was suggested. They only had to complete 7. And it wasn't easy, but it wasn't difficult. Some of it costed a little money, like 3-inch screws, lighting, that kind of thing did cost a little bit of money, but most of it was stuff they could just do.
And I guess
So
the other piece of that is, how much success have you seen? Part of it is on the residents who live in apartment communities, but a big part of it is on the
Management.
property owners and the property managers. So how much success did you see when you were?
there's a high turnover rate
Yeah.
with management
Yeah.
in apartment communities, but the biggest thing was developing relationships
Yeah.
with those managers and the owners. A lot of our apartment communities in Norman are out-of-state owners that don't have a lot of input within that community, and we do have a lot of managers who have a long-term vested interest in that community, who have been managers for long periods of times. Those are the ones that I would seek out, and a lot of those are lower income Section 8 groups that we would seek out to work with. My favorite one to work with, one of my favorites, was Vicksburg Village, which is right across from Irving. The manager there has been a manager there for a long, long time, and it is 100% Section 8, and they were the very first fully certified crime-free. So they went through all 3 phases of it. We could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
Stephen, this is probably deja vu for you. He was on council when we discussed this years ago. But so phase 1 is basically attend to manager training. We go through all the CPTED stuff. We talk about crime prevention theory. I had one of the landlord-tenant judges come in and actually teach Landlord-Tenant Act to us, how to go through court, what they did in court. We talked about we discussed serving notices in detail, what types of notices, how many days, all of that in detail. And they were more than happy to do that because they were going to see these people in court on a regular basis. So we wanted them as educated as possible. We had fire come in and do fire safety skills, what's important in an apartment community, things like that. We had a whole gamut of things, what to look for. We even did we had a terrorism in apartment communities class. It was hot button at that time, so that's what we brought in, and we taught people about what to look for. Drugs, things like that. We brought all that stuff in. So that was phase one. Phase two was the CPTED survey, the community security survey. And I would lay out, this is what you need, this is what's required, here it is. Here's the survey. I'd give them a copy of it. They got a workbook, it was several hundred pages, and it had a copy and how to do everything, essentially. So that was phase two. Once they completed that, they called me. I went out, I did a security survey of the apartment community. I'd tell them what they needed to do. And then once they completed that, I'd go back out and I'd re-inspect. And then they would either complete, they'd pass, or they would not. And then I would give them, here, this is what you need to fix. Once they completed it, they moved on phase three. Phase three is that the event, like we talked about activities. It was a community social, essentially. So they would hold a community-wide social. We would do hot dogs, hamburgers, ice cream. I had an ice cream social at one of them. It was just basically invite everybody in your apartment community. We talk about crime prevention. We talk about how far the apartment community has come, what all the steps that they've taken. We basically praise the apartment community for being a part of making their lives safer, their community safer. And we make it all about them. It has nothing to do with us, but they did it all. And then we talk about, just basics of crime prevention, how they can keep themselves safe, stuff like that. So, and that was it. And then every year, to maintain certification, they had to do a safety social. So we would kind of piggyback off of National Night Out. And if they did it during National Night Out, we'd count that towards crime free. And they would keep their certificate. They'd get signed saying, we're certified crime-free property, blah, blah, blah. So that was the basis of the whole program. So, but it was all about relationships. So it was me going out to meet apartment community managers, developing relationships, getting them through training, giving them the tools to essentially make their property better. So I loved it. I did it for 6 years. It was a lot of fun. Then I got promoted. Other things came up. The program kind of went a different direction, and we don't do it anymore, I guess. So, but we still work with apartment communities. They still call me. At least the ones that are still around Norman. Some of the managers that I still talk to. So, but anyway, so
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Councilor Peacock.
Yeah, you kind of just touched on this, but how would you suggest handling an absentee landlord of a vacant property?
Yeah.
Basically, somebody who doesn't live here but owns property and has no intention to develop it, and it just will sit vacant for perpetuity.
I can think of one that comes to mind.
Think
Maybe
of
down
the same
south.
one.
So I used to live down there. Well, I know there's a process called nuisance abatement. That is a long process. I know. And I visited when we were doing crime-free stuff, we visited with Fort Worth PD. They had an entire unit of nuisance abatement officers, and they were mixed in with code enforcement officers. I know code enforcement would be the ones that would have to handle a nuisance abatement for us because it's all under code enforcement ordinances. I know city legal obviously is going to be heavily involved in that. That is a difficult task in Oklahoma. That has been an eyesore for a long time if it's the same property I'm thinking of, and I think it is. But I don't know how to answer that as far as what steps would be taken, because I know we're called down there very, very frequently for trespassers. And the people that run the property want to sign a ticket on everybody who steps foot on that property. And it can be a hassle. But I mean, we're called, we have to go. That's unfortunately the reality of it. So,
Yeah, right.
as much as I don't want to go,
Is that since we allowed them to have a on-site security guard?
yes,
So there still is we're still having to go.
we don't go down there as much as we used to, but we do still go down. And there's been more of an understanding once we educated on what we will do and what we will not do to the individual. then I think it kind of helped smooth things out. That took supervisors going down there and say, look, we're not going to do that. Stop calling us for that kind of thing.
There
We
was
had to be
a
blunt.
preemption law a couple years ago that made it more difficult for cities to address nuisance properties. So
Well, because in other states, you have the ability to levy property taxes
Right.
on people. Right? We don't have that ability here. So I think that kind of touches on the incentive, disincentive conversation that we were just having. So I just appreciate that.
Absolutely. Sorry I couldn't
No,
answer.
no, it's a tough question. I understand that. Yeah.
okay, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
And I guess we'll hear an update at some point in the future from staff about maybe some potential changes, additions. Okay, we've got item
you.
number.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Teddy. We got item number 3 on the agenda today is a discussion regarding Americans with Disabilities Act requirements for taxi cabs, and I would probably say any kind of ride share, transit. Basically, we've had several members of the community that have asked for a while about this issue, and I think a lot of us would like to have some clarification on what the law is in regard to enforcement of the ADA. Is there something that's required in Norman that we're not complying with or we're not fulfilling? So I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is so we could get some answers to those questions for the public and have a discussion. So our city attorney, Catherine Walker, is here.
Okay, so I've given you a just sort of front and back page fact sheet about these things that talks about the federal law, state law, which is implicated for ride sharing, and then our local ordinance. So under federal law, this is in the Code of Federal Regulations, and it's in the section titled Transportation Services for Individuals with Disabilities, ADA. So it's very specific. And this section in particular on here is about providers of taxi service. So taxi service providers are not required to purchase or lease accessible automobiles. When they do purchase a vehicle or lease a vehicle that's not an automobile, so I think this is a van, something like that, it is required to be accessible unless they can demonstrate equivalency. And I'll talk to you in a minute about what that means. A provider of taxi service is not required to purchase vehicles for their fleet or to have a particular number of accessible vehicles in its fleet. And then private entities providing tax service cannot discriminate against individuals with disabilities by actions including things like refusing to provide services to individuals with disabilities who are able to use the taxi vehicle, refusing to assist with stowing their mobility devices, or charging higher fares simply because they're carrying someone who's disabled or who requires a little bit of help. So what is equivalency? When you read this, it reads, I went back and forth probably 3 times thinking this sounds a lot like a bus system because we've heard so much about a fixed route system since acquiring a bus system. But taxi cabs are considered a demand responsive system. So this statute does apply, but basically they would be deemed to provide equivalent service. So this is the case where they go buy something other than an automobile and they don't make it accessible. They don't buy an accessible van, they just buy a regular van. They would have to prove that they have this equivalent service here, that it's provided in the most integrated setting appropriate to the needs of the individual, and it's equivalent to the service that's provided to other individuals with respect to certain particular service characteristics, and you see those listed. So schedules for fixed route, for taxi cabs, demand responsive, it's response time. The fares have to be the same, area of service, hours and days of service, the availability of information, the capability to make reservations, constraints on capacity or service availability, and then restriction priorities based on trip purpose. So essentially, customers or riders who are handicapped or disabled under the ADA have to have the same access, similar access to the services that are provided to other customers.
If they have a
If they have a van that's not accessible, they have to be able to show that they,
But if
they're
Yellow Cab
providing the
only
same
has
service.
taxi cars,
Right.
they don't have to provide service to someone in a wheelchair.
They would still have to provide service. They don't have to provide accessible service. So they don't have to go by.
That person can't get in the car.
Right.
They don't have to service
Right.
them. I see.
So the Department of Justice is the entity that enforces these provisions by federal law. And so that's who would take that on if there was some violation of that.
Are we, if someone had a problem, who do they contact?
There is a DOJ office for this district. I think it's in Dallas. And they have that information on their website.
We encourage folks to contact me. I'm the
Okay,
ADA
I was gonna say, is there a
coordinator
local?
for the city. We get calls all the time, and we help them find the best resource, Department of Justice, whatever that is. But
Okay.
my assignment from the city manager is ADA coordinator for the city of Norman.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Sean can help route those to the right party. I bring up the state requirements on the back of the page only because I assume there might be questions about Uber and Lyft and why don't we regulate them. And so just as a reminder, when they first came onto the scene, the state quickly adopted legislation that took that away from us.
Preemption.
So they adopted the Oklahoma Transportation Network Company Act, and basically this gives the Oklahoma Corporation Commission exclusive jurisdiction over all things ride sharing. But they do have some authority and some policies about discrimination. So every company has to adopt a policy of non-discrimination. Drivers have to follow all laws related to service animals. Again, just like federal law, you can't charge more to someone just because they have a physical disability. But importantly, that when you when you're taking a reservation, you must provide passengers an opportunity to indicate whether they need a wheelchair accessible vehicle. If the provider cannot arrange a wheelchair accessible prearranged ride, it has to then direct the passenger to an alternate provider of accessible service, if available. And that, of course, is the problem. Locally, we have a provision that gets brought up from time to time. And I don't know the history of how this ended up in our ordinance, but we have licensed taxi cabs, motor buses, limo service for years, very long time. They are all required to get a license from the city with one limited exception. They have to be inspected by the city. They have to meet certain insurance requirements. We look at the records of the drivers. They cannot discriminate in their operation. And then we have this provision that's interesting simply because we've never provided operating subsidies, so it's hard to know where it came from. But it says if they are receiving operating subsidies from the city, state, or federal government, at least one vehicle in the fleet must be accessible to all riders. Staff must have access to and be trained in the use of a telecommunications device for the deaf, and all staff must receive ADA training. And so that is one piece. Currently, we have 3 providers licensed. Uber and Lyft has certainly impacted this, I imagine, but Airport Express has 5 vans. That's just a ride to and from the airport. If you need an accessible vehicle, they partner with MedRide to provide you with handicap accessible transportation.
That's just to the airport.
Just to the airport. Postal Training Service Center, of course, has vans, and so they're licensed, but those are really for their guest use. You can't call them up and, make a reservation to take you somewhere from your house. And then a company called iDrive Norman, which only has automobiles. So again, that trigger in federal law to purchase an accessible vehicle doesn't come into play if you only have automobiles. We license those companies. If you violate the terms of your license, you could lose the license, but there are also potential criminal penalties involved as well.
So we're not licensing any taxi cab companies in Norman right now?
Just
Like A1?
I drive Norman.
Yellow Cab?
A1 currently does not have a license. They didn't renew.
Sooner
For
Cab, all
For
that.
whatever reason, I feel like I still see them occasionally. So we're going to follow up on that. That just came up yesterday. But this iDrive Norman is the only taxi cab. Yellow Cab went out of business here locally. Now, Oklahoma City used to have some of their Yellow Cab cars licensed in Norman as well, but right now they do not. If there are other companies operating besides these,
I'd be happy to, I mean, if I can get the information, we'll reach out to them, contact them, let them know they are required to have a license. And I don't know exactly where the subsidy language came from either, but I do know, I don't think we ever did it here, but I do know in some cities, they partner with taxi cab companies for rides to avoid drunk driving and things like that. Some universities do that, and so that's the only thing I could think of, but we've never done that here, so I don't know why it got in and ended up in there either.
So the public transit system provides services partly because it gets federal funding.
Yeah, Catherine mentioned, if I may, Councilor, we follow 49 CFR 371, but that's the basis of our whole system.
Right.
The fact that we have a fixed route bus system requires us to have a parallel paratransit system, and we do that every day in Mark Norman.
Okay. Since these other entities that may exist don't get federal funding, they don't get city funding or state funding, they don't have to, and unless they have another vehicle.
That's correct.
Then
If
they
they
don't have
purchase
to
a different
comply.
kind of vehicle, and I'm thinking, this is a van in this case, the definition is rail cars and all kinds of things. But a van, then they could be required under federal law to make it accessible if they can't show they've got equivalency. Equivalency. It's just that didn't sound right. If they can't show they've got equivalency under the federal law.
Okay. Councilmember Studley?
How does that apply towards services like Lyft and Uber?
Lyft and Uber don't meet the definition of taxi service under federal law either. So right now they're operating in Oklahoma, as far as I can tell, just under our state law. That doesn't have a requirement that it be accessible. It just has a requirement that if you need an accessible ride, you tell them, and if they don't have one, they will point you to one that does, a service that does, if there is one.
And Mr. O'Leary, you had said that we provide a parallel service. So to me, a parallel service would mean that if I'm in a wheelchair, I should just be able to go get a ride at any time. But it's my understanding that they have to book that 24 hours in advance.
Correct.
So how is that parallel?
Not an expert on the law, but I would say that is the federal guideline for transit services, that if we operate a fixed route system, that we also have a paratransit system available. And then under that paratransit guideline, we have these 24-hour advance notice guidelines, that sort of thing, identical to what really most transit systems in the country. Embark OKC operates with the same 24-hour advance requirement, that sort of thing. So that's where I think these federal guidelines merge into the FTA regulations for those who operate public transit systems.
Is that a federal guideline?
Yes.
That is 24 hours.
I believe so. And again, with a bus, you can't pick a bus up at any time. It's still operating according to a schedule. So I think federal law sees that as an equivalent service.
All of our fixed route buses are also fully accessible.
Right.
So we have dual accessibility in our system, and most transit systems do. But they're not curbside. The paratransit comes to your front door. That's curbside service. Very different than a bus stop.
Any other comments, questions from committee members? Just a second, John. Councilor Peacock, I'll get to you next.
Councilmember Studley and I are having a conversation earlier this week, and she floated out a really interesting idea that I think might tie into this iDrive Norman entity that we already have here. But what if we were to able basically to incentivize a few drivers to retrofit or adapt their cars to be ADA accessible, and we as a city use, I don't know, American Recovery Act money or some other funding mechanism to make that happen, but we ask that they use those cars exclusively in Norman and be available kind of at through the hotline or some shorter time frame than the 24-hour booking period. Again, just an idea, but I thought I'd put that on the table.
It seems like that, based on what we're looking at, it looks like we would have to have some sort of incentive to get these companies to do this. Because, they probably aren't going to go buy a van if they know they have to comply with this unless they want to. And it doesn't appear that
Yeah, and I
any
think
private providers want to.
with
really.
ride sharing picking up a lot of that business, they're probably operating on pretty thin margins. And so I
That
do
being the
think it would
private,
take an
like, personal
incentive
car
to,
too, so.
right, an
That's, I think, a
incentive
big deal too.
to get them.
iDrive only
going in
has
that
one
direction.
car license.
Okay.
It's not like a fleet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is the iDrive, are those like golf cart looking things? That's what I'm picturing right now.
Well, it's a car, it's a Nissan car. Are you talking about the ones over at the university?
Well, I see them around
Shuffle?
campus, but yeah, maybe
Yeah,
Shuffle,
Shuffle,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But they're not licensed by
those
the city, I
different?
guess.
Do those have to, those are different than like taxis, so those wouldn't be under this, like the shuttles?
They're not, we looked at that last time we went through all of that, and I know Beth looked it up. They don't meet the definition of motorized or something. I can't remember now how it all came out, but, and at the time, they were just operating on campus. Later, we learned that they do go to Greek Row and Campus Corner and pick up or drop off, but I'd have to pull out my notes. I don't remember exactly what
I do know that they're limited in the speed limit that they can go, so they can only ride on certain streets. And so that limits where they can go within the city. I do know that.
More language on the operating subsidies or whatever. Do you have that language about the operating subsidies, or can you get what that is to us?
Yeah, it's on that page. That's exactly what the language says, I believe, from our ordinance. It's
But
almost.
what is the operating subsidy though?
We've never had one that we know of, so I'm assuming if we did one, it would be some sort of grant or contract with a taxi cab company to subsidize their operations, and so it would be something along the lines of what you all
It's
were
already
discussing.
kind of written in here, we just never
We've just never funded anything.
funded it.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be
I think that, yeah.
a
I thought the
relief
idea
act.
had some legs,
Yeah.
certainly, so.
Okay. Yeah.
Nick, I just would mention, these are very maintenance intensive, so if you subsidize the capital, you're gonna need to subsidize maintenance. You would be surprised what we spend to fix these lifts every day. They're just very maintenance intensive.
I think that's absolutely fair, yeah.
I just have to say this, to be quite frank. I don't think that the maintenance really should be an issue when we're talking about people's ability to get around. I personally have no idea what I'm going to do tomorrow, or if plans change, my kid gets sick, something may happen where I have to be able to call at a moment's notice and get a ride. And so I think that's only fair for everyone in our community to be able to do that same thing. And so if we have this in our language, that we have operating subsidies, then that definitely is something that we as a community need to look at so that we can provide these services for everyone.
Thank you.
John
High?
John Hine. I dealt with a situation where I need same-day delivery service. It was a crisis in Norman. We had an ice storm and electricity was knocked out. I was stuck in my house and I could not get out of my house because you don't have same-day delivery service. There, under the law, having City of Norman, you're supposed to have a plan in place to take care of people in a crisis mode. I called Embark Plus. You know what they told me? We don't deliver same-day delivery service. It's the law, of federal law, which it's not. I'm going to go into this a little bit farther when I quit do that. Okay, it's not the federal law at all. Because, then I ended up calling City of Norman, and they made them give me a ride that day. The whole time while they were giving me a ride, they were cussing me out and saying, this is a courtesy ride. We don't do this kind of stuff. It's not our rules. It's not our ways. And they were referring back to Oklahoma City, which is also Embark, that for 18 years, they have not given the same-day ride service. I said, well, under the City of Norman, there is no transportation out there to help out during a crisis. Okay, that's the first thing. Okay, then I went to Travis, that's gone right now, and I said, Travis, Taylor, and I asked him, Taylor, show me the law that states that they can't deliver same-day delivery service, because I was understanding that they would apply the same service to the Metro Bus does, which has, you can get the same-day delivery service. So they should have look at that and say, I should be able to get same-day delivery service. Well, Travis came back with me 2 weeks later was something he got from Embark, not from the federal government. And I said, I'm looking for it in the federal government laws. He could not find me nothing in the federal government laws at all. So since y'all are telling me it's in the federal laws, get it to me, okay? I want to see it, okay? Instead of stating it in these meetings that there's certain things that are required that you're not got backing. Where's that law? You say you have it. Where is that law? Okay? I want to see that law, okay? Because I had Travis, your guy in transportation, try to show it to me, and all he could do was Embark Plus, okay? And that's wrong. Okay, because we do need time for crises even in it. I mean, I was on my, I just called the office up because I was freaking out because I was stuck in my house. I had no way to get to the hotel while I needed to stay. And there's another thing that you need to look into is during a crisis, you're supposed to have evacuations scheduled for emergencies in place to take care of people in disability. And you do not have so right now at all. Okay, that's that situation. Okay, taxi services, I thought, since they are a business, or like any other business, had to apply operationally for people with disability to be able to be funding on their rides and to ride it. Now you're telling me that they don't have to have that? Well, under the law, any business that's running in Norman has to be accessible for a disability. That's the way I thought the law was written. But you're telling me now it's not. So we really need to do a lot more investigation, a lot more study, and bring it out where you're getting these rules from. Because these are not rules that I'm seeing in the federal government or the state government. Now, the Embark, Uber, I've never heard this before. So, and I haven't checked in Uber because I thought being the individuality of each one of them being individual, they are not a company that has more than one. But now I'm finding out that the parent company, all of them, can held to be accountable to make sure that it's, accessible, available. They are required to make sure that some of their fleet has to be accessible if they're going to do that like that. Okay? So before we start stating these rules and regulations that you're saying, I've done a lot of research, and this has been the last year because I've been worried about this. Taxi services, we've been doing this for years, trying to get you to try to put something in place. Taxi services are not the same as the bus service. The bus service rides only during the day. Taxi services are at night. That is not going to, and there is nothing. You know what they tell you? Oh, we don't have it. Too bad. That's what they don't send you somebody else. And they don't have it. Here in Norman, we do not have accessible people from after 9 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. Sunday, try to go to church. You can't. If you're going to try to ride on a ride. None of the churches can afford these things. They can't afford it. I went to First Baptist. I had to go in the snow. 2 miles in the snow to go to church. Because there's no services available, and I believe that I need to go to church. Now, that wasn't smart for me to do. The weather, you can really get hurt. But because Norman is not providing the right transportation in this town, and we need to look at it, okay? Because you may be stating one thing, but I'm finding out a whole lot different, and I've done the research also. It'll hit your own staff, okay? And he couldn't find me nothing else. This has also been done with PI. We've done it with Progressive Independence and trying to research this because we want to find out the services so these people can have rides. And it's really scary when you're trying to get somewhere or the power goes out, or let's say you get sick and you can't go one day and you need to go the next day, to go get groceries. Or somebody in your family is hurting and you want to go visit them. And you find out they're sick or you can't go that day. I mean, these are not being approached and taken care of. But I think we need to do a lot more research before we say federal law states this and leave it at the end button. And I'm finding out it's a lot differently. Okay? And that's where he could not bring me anything to the table. He brought me Embark Plus law in Oklahoma City. Okay? And that's going to be addressed pretty soon too. Because Embark's getting caught in a lot of things they're doing here. And since nobody's been addressing it in Oklahoma City, they're about to get hit real soon. Because they're going to follow the rules. People getting a lot more people going around that have disabilities, and they need these services. And it's sad when you call somebody and they go, "We don't provide that." Norman doesn't care enough. You're a second-rate citizen, more or less, and we do not have second-rate citizens in this town, do we? So let's make it happen.
So that is the reason why we wanted to talk about this, so we can start trying to figure some of this out. Do you have something you'd like to say, Richard? Richard Anderson, Ward 4. think.
Breathe.
I need to get young.
Take us with you.
Who helps provide access? Whoever. Is there anybody here that what? Worked at where? Status? Worked at where?
For road.
R-O-D-E, road. Standard? Taxi. Is there anybody here who's drove a taxi? Worked on a taxi? Rode in a taxi? Is there anybody here who's rode in a taxi?
Yeah. Been a long time though.
Not in Norman, but.
Not in Norman.
Why?
Yep, because I have a car.
'Cause I
and
have
a
a car.
bicycle. But I haven't had to. I haven't needed to.
Yep, he said I can't ride a bicycle.
That's right.
You can't direct.
Richard needs to be able to hang
And
out
most
with
of
his
the
son too.
sidewalks are not accessible either for them in wheelchairs, so most of them have to ride in the streets because the sidewalks have lots of cracks. I even trip over them and I'm not even in a wheelchair, so I can imagine hitting a bump, you could possibly flip or worse, so.
He needs to get out of Norman and can't even do that.
Yep.
He's advertising for money for transportation to see his son.
It is wrong. It costs him about $150 a ride.
And that was another question for me. Is there a way that I could get access to a van to drive if I want to, since I'm an at-home PCA for the disability community? Is there a way I could get access to transportation for them to help out? Or no? Is that not something that I could get?
That's what we're looking at.
Oh, okay. Because I think they were talking about vans are the only thing that can be accessible for wheelchairs. You have to have a van.
Yeah,
if they buy something in their fleet other than a car, then they may have to comply with the ADA.
So that's how the taxi
But if they
services
only
are
have
getting
cars,
away.
they don't have to.
Is there a car accessible?
I don't
like-
know.
In the last 12 years, I haven't seen. You have seen. Taxi cabin running. With vans.
Yeah.
There was one company I remember having
It's,
vans, or a van at least.
what happened with that situation is it was A1, and they tried to become available, and they tried to ask the city for money through Lisa Craig, and Lisa Craig turned them down. I sent them that way because we had a meeting in the library about the transportation here, and they were there at that meeting trying to offer something accessible. It was over a year ago, and they were trying to be accessible, but they were banned down where they could not do it. And I said, well, talk to Lisa Craig because that's lower income people. So this is for people, a lot of people that don't have money that can't afford a van themselves. And they were turned away. And they said it was very hard to make a van accessible and how much it would cost them in handling it. And that's where this comes into play. I mean, it is very expensive, but if we can send some incentive from somewhere where it's worth it for our citizens, that would take care of a lot of your situations, the crisis need. You wouldn't have to worry about same-day delivery service, so you're taking care of your plant, you know, and that's going to take care of that situation. That's going to take care of people who want to go to movies, that want to go to church. That's going to take care of their demand. But right now, there's one that's in, it won't come to enormous, and thank you, but it costs over $100. It's called Go-Go's, and that's unreasonable, you know, so we need to bring it down. But we need to help, just like we did with transportation on the metro buses. We all have an obligation to help them if they want a new business. I mean, it's there, and we have the ordinance in play. Why don't we help them? You know, instead of turning them away and limiting our transportation for our citizens, like this guy.
Right.
I mean, same-day delivery service, that would have eliminated that. You know, that would take care of this cart thing, you know what I'm saying? And take care of it. There's got to be money there to help them.
Well, yeah, please.
You go ahead.
Norman will see.
You're gonna go shopping more? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And also you can carry more bags because the one on the Earnbark only allows you to carry 3 bags. We get paid once a year, or once a month. We get all that money and we can't carry more than 3 bags on the things. Now I did talk to Walmart and I tried to get them to do the delivery service after we would do it. And they said, well, you can order online. I said, there's a limited amount of things you can order online and they're a little bit more expensive. So if they would let us go shop and then deliver the products to our house, that would take care of it. Then they told me that it was a private contract company. And maybe you might want to check into that company that they have, because it's probably pretty reasonable.
Oh, the grocery delivery.
Yes,
What?
it's private.
I see them, but I don't know what that one's called.
But they're based, they're in contract
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Walmart.
yeah.
They're not part of Walmart.
There
Yeah.
is one through the VA center also. I used to work there that would take them on grocery trips. I don't remember.
Dale,
that
yeah,
name.
Dale Graham has one
Yeah,
of
but
those
I was
vans
wondering
on
if they have it
Veterans
just
Center.
for the VA. Why can't they do it for?
Thank you for your comments.
There is one of the places that does do transportation in Norman. You all know about. It's called Able. They have a bus that goes around in Norman all week. On Wednesday, they do take to your Walmart. The rest of the day, they will take you to doctor's appointments. They gotta have to before 2 o'clock the day before also.
Okay.
So that still limits that time. You know what I'm trying to say? I've checked into everything that's possible to do. And Ricky has too, because he really does need the transportation.
Absolutely.
And it's limiting Norman on how much money they're getting because we're trapped. We can only carry 3 bags on the bus. You know, how many times do you want to go to the store, You know what I'm trying to say, to get groceries.
Yeah.
You know, and so that we're really limiting our getting money. I mean, Friday event, I mean, the second Friday art thing, it's hard for us to get there. You know what I'm saying? I want to do it, but you know, okay, I can only ride till, and then the bus route, they really don't come near it. You know, but so we can enjoy that also. So the taxi services would take care of that need also. So that would be really, like Ricky's saying, promote tons more business for you because you have more people out doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Councilor Peacock has.
I'm just curious, like, how many dedicated vehicles do they think it would take to serve the needs of the community? Is it one, or are we talking a handful, 5, 10? How many vehicles do you think we would need to have in our quote-unquote fleet?
Well,
Three to five just to start off.
Okay.
you may look at the situation of what the MR Plus is using out on the street, and that's going to give you an example of what they're going to need at night time. And then they take away 20%.
Okay.
That's what they do with the yellow cab at night.
Okay.
They decrease it by 20%. Can I check with them? I tried every way possible to get something out there at night, and they said, well, they cut back on it at night. But I think if you really promote it, and just word of mouth and get it out there, I think you're going to have a lot more people wanting it.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think it gives us some good data to make some decisions on there.
Councilmember Studley?
I think that this, kind of what I was talking to Councilmember Peacock about, you know, if we do have a lot of Lyfts and Ubers here that are vans or that are trucks that are bigger vehicles. And so I feel like this would be a great opportunity for us as a city to utilize this operating subsidies for individual drivers versus like a fleet, if that's possible, and say, you know, if we use part of the ARP money to help people with transportation to outfit their cars, I think I believe it's around 30 to 50,000. I could be off with the numbers to put a lift on a van. My uncle had one done. So, I mean, for, you know, $200,000, we could do that to 4 vehicles. And it would be a voluntary basis, like whoever is driving Uber or Lyft already and that want to do that and that would agree, you know, we could work some kind of deal out where they have to stay so many years in our city to do that. So just some food for thought if Embark isn't willing.
Is this something that we can use HUD money for?
No. Happy to ask. We got a great HUD rep, so we will tee up the
Seems
question.
like we have a lot of success in getting those grants. It'd be
Yeah.
nice to see if we can.
Councilmember Schuler?
Yeah, well, I'm wondering, because, you know, John mentioned that, you know, A1, and we're not currently in contract with them, like they're gone. Is there a possibility
They
of?
haven't renewed their licenses. If they're still operating in town, they're operating illegally, so.
Sure, no, I understand, but they
I mean,
they
you
were
know that,
interested.
but-
They were interested in doing this, and so that might be a company that we could
Right.
utilize the subsidy for, to retrofit and to utilize that and bring them back into that licensure system within Norman and get, you know, provide the service.
I
Which
don't
would
know if
be-
they were thinking of purchasing a van or what, because they didn't have a van licensed with us. They were all vehicles.
Sure,
But,
yeah.
they would definitely have to have a subsidy because they struggled just to pass inspection
Yeah.
every year.
But this would be at least a start of a conversation if they've already expressed interest in the past.
Their main office is on Dakota Street. They work out of a house.
Yeah.
So did Yellow Cab. In Ward 2.
Yeah, I said,
He wants to stay one more thing.
Sure.
if I was going to do it, if I was going to do it,
You were going for it.
if I was going to do this, I would do it. I would do it with help.
If you were coming here, is that what you're talking about? Somebody else?
If I was going to do this, if I was going to do this, I would do it
R-A-N.
A ramp, I think he's trying to say ramp.
Yeah, a ramp instead of a lift. Because lifts do malfunction a lot too. Yeah, I've noticed that.
And I was about to say it'd be a lot
Cost
cheaper
less.
too.
Maintenance wise.
Program that you may want to parallel to is an accessibility program for houses, and they have a program set up. If you would parent it like that and do it like that, then what they do is they make you show what you're going to do, and then what they do is they'll pay up so much money, and they say that, and then what you do is you have to prove that you're going to be doing it for a person with disability. So they may have to keep a log first, like on grant money from the DHS, you have to keep a log of how many riders you have and all that. And that might be able to give you the parenting and justification and everything else to be able to prove what you got. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, if you did like that, that might help. You know, because then you got your, you know, paperwork for the federal government too.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to know today was, are there ride companies in Norman that are not following the law, or are we not enforcing something? It sounds like we're enforcing on what we have. That any entity that's getting any government dollars that we know of is providing service, not on the same day as they've mentioned, but as our coordinator, if we could get maybe a citation on the law about the 24-hour period.
Yeah, I'll email that to you right now.
Okay. And then I think with a goal going forward of, you know, we're trying to expand our transit system, of course, to potential, you know, later, maybe, I don't know about later hours, but other days, Sundays and things, but trying to fill the gaps in transit for people when our transit system isn't operating, and currently like on Sundays, and trying to figure out what all options there are in the whole city. And I think the council at our retreat will probably need to discuss, since we're going to be discussing how we might like to use these federal funds that we've got. That might be something that we put on the board and talk about, since, yes, it does have the word subsidy in existing language locally, and we just have never done it. So we can look at how we might take advantage of that. If there is a way, if there's any partners that want to, if there's any program out there that already exists where a city is partnered with a taxi cab company, or even Uber, like you said, I think maybe a good point is that the umbrella of the company, they don't, I mean, would they be required, maybe, I don't know, to have some sort of option? I don't know if they get around it because they don't own a fleet.
But how did that litigation come out as to whether or not the individual drivers were independent contractors? Or is it done yet?
I don't know if it's worked its way through the process entirely, but I
wonder
mean, I
if
think
there's
that was
something
the argument is they're independent contractors, they're operating their personal vehicles.
I have to file it. I'm an Uber driver. I have to file it as independent.
Yeah.
They do require, and Councilmember Sedley can confirm this since she's a driver, you have to have a rider on your insurance, your auto insurance that you're transporting. But Uber and Lyft also have, they don't know how much they advertise that, but they have a big umbrella policy as well. But they require the drivers. I mean, I think it's just kind of a double
Layers of insurance
protection.
I haven't renewed mine for this year, so.
Okay, well,
You won't have time now.
Yeah.
I think we were able to answer some of the questions about taxi cab companies and the law, but it sounds like there's some further discussion to have about how we might solve these problems of mobility for our folks. So yeah, I'll look forward to talking about this with council in the retreat about the federal funds and things like this, and maybe we can get an update in a few months. Yes,
Just wanted to mention,
Sean.
Jennifer, you've got a really great ADA Citizen Advisory Committee that works on your behalf. We just met last week, as a matter of fact, and they have a public transportation subcommittee working with us now on our transition plan for Embark Norman. So if you're looking for a group that has their heart in this, they and most of these folks have a disability of some sort.
I appreciate that suggestion, Sean. I would definitely recommend that they take a look at this and provide some feedback on whenever possible.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Our last item is miscellaneous comment. Anything from committee members?
I just want to add on to that ARA discussion, since we've been talking about sidewalks. I think maybe evaluating some critical paths, and especially the core area, maybe from
Gaps. Yeah.
Exactly. Especially on some routes that would be to the grocery store, to some other places. Maybe we can fill some of those gaps, like you said.
And we've done a really great job in Norman over the last 10, 15 years of updating curbs, putting in ramps. We even have some ramps that don't go anywhere because there's just a ramp and then but we've been putting them in anticipation and taking advantage of federal money and things like that. And because I definitely remember there used to be a lot more curbs or drop-offs and no ramp at all, and starting to not see those around as much. But one of them could be enough for somebody in a wheelchair to create a problem. So we'll keep working on that, and we'll continue to have this
I'd like to
discussion.
comment on the new sidewalks they're building. They're building these ramps before where you get off into the street. They have a pallet right here, and then they have the ramp that goes to it. So the level of that thing is at the same level of the street. What that does is it presents a problem. The first time you have water, the water goes to that area. So we have to go from the ramp up here to the water, then go out in the street. The second thing it does is if it freezes, guess what happens? You're going down a ramp, across the platform, and sliding right out into the street, which is causing a problem. This location is a brand new sidewalk, less than 2 weeks old right now, across from Cleveland School. It was just built. I just saw it, okay? And it's there, okay? So we need to teach our people that are building these sidewalks the right way to build a sidewalk. When are they going to teach them in class? When are they going to say, you can't do it this way? When is somebody going to be watching over them and say, this is wrong? Are our engineers not being taught right either? Maybe they need to be educated on the accessible thing. Because that's a safety hazard right there, sitting to wait to happen this winter. You know what I'm saying? And especially when our plows going down the street and throw that snow right in that area on top of it. So, I mean, really, we do have a problem with the city right now. When
They are being built to federal standards because
No, that one's not
we are
federal
getting federal dollars.
Okay, that one was not built to filter status because the ramps are before the foundation, causing it at the same level of the thing. The way it's supposed to be built, the foundation's supposed to be up this high, and then you go off the ramps into the street. Okay, and that was not happening on that location. And there's no reason for that to happen. I still haven't figured it out. It looks cool,
Okay.
but is it accessible? You know what I'm saying?
Well, maybe we could take a look and see what's going on with that that one. So, okay. Any other comments, questions?
I was
Councilor
looking
Studley?
at what city attorney sent us, and I'm curious where the portion is, because I see something about response times. The entity shall schedule and provide paratransit services to any ADA paratransit eligible person at any requested time on a particular day in response to a request for services made the previous day.
Right.
Reservations may be taken by reservation agent. But then if you go down, it says the entity may negotiate, the entity shall make reservation service available during at least all normal business hours of entity administrator's offices. Well, hang on, I saw something where it said 1 hour here. The entity may negotiate pickup times with the individual, but the entity shall not require an ADA paratransit eligible individual to schedule a trip to begin more than 1 hour before or after the individual's desired departure time.
Right, so in B, it says, make a reservation for the next day. In that B2, it's saying you can't You can negotiate pickup times, but you can't say, I know you want to be picked up at 3, we're going to pick you up at 1. It has to be within that hour.
Okay. Okay, so it's giving them the ride home is what that's referring to.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And where does that apply for crisis?
This doesn't really have anything good for
But the
crisis.
city of Norman's required to have pickup for crisis situations for hazard of the disability community in their plan to get them to a safe location. That's the objective of the city of Norman. And I don't think you can do that 24 hours in advance.
Likely not.
Okay.
We got a lot of stuff to fix.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for looking that stuff up for us. It definitely appears there's a further conversation to have about this, and we'll continue to look at ways that we can improve our service and address those concerns that we've heard. So thank you all very much for being here. I don't think we have a meeting in July, so we'll be back at the end of August. I think we might have the parking stuff ready to talk about again. So,
True that.
Actually, that's going to full
Oh,
council.
that's right.
Oh, okay.
Last instruction.
Oh, that's right,
Take
yeah,
it.
study session.
Yep.
right,
Absolutely,
that's
study
right.
session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that's it, this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.
Yeah.